Stay close to me, dear. They're waiting for us.
For power and wealth, it noticed. Heads turned, whispers traveled faster than the waiters, and phones subtly lifted to capture the moment. She was a woman used to attention, used to boardrooms falling silent when she entered, used to numbers bending in her favor. But none of that prepared her for the quiet storm waiting at a small corner table, or for the single father who would change her understanding of strength forever. Before the story goes any further, pause for a moment. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that small actions can quietly change lives, take a second to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel Silent Hope. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that need them most. She had chosen the restaurant carefully, elegant, calm, refined, a place where people spoke softly and where her daughter wouldn't feel overwhelmed by noise she couldn't hear anyway. The CEO had learned to think 10 steps ahead in business, but motherhood had taught her to think even further. Her daughter, small for her age, sat straight-backed in her chair, eyes observant, hands folded, taking in the world visually the way she always did. The girl had grown used to people underestimating her, assuming silence meant absence. Her mother hated that. Tonight was meant to be a celebration, a quiet reward after a week of brutal negotiations, lawsuits, and sleepless nights. But something felt off almost immediately. The stares lingered too long. Not the admiring glances the CEO usually received, but something sharper, something uncomfortable. A well-dressed couple nearby kept glancing toward the child, then back to their plates. A server hesitated, unsure how to address the girl. The mother felt a familiar tightening in her chest, the one that came whenever the world reminded her that power meant nothing when it came to protecting her child from ignorance. She tried to ignore it. She focused on her daughter's face, on the way her eyes lit up at the dessert menu pictures, on the subtle tapping of fingers against the table, a habit born from learning rhythm through vibration instead of sound. The CEO reminded herself that she could buy skyscrapers, fund charities, influence governments, but she couldn't buy her daughter a world that understood her. Then the tension escalated. A manager approached their table, his smile stiff, his posture rehearsed. He gestured vaguely, his eyes avoiding the child for just a second too long. The message was clear even without words. The mother felt heat rise in her face. She had faced discrimination before, quiet, polished, disguised as policy or atmosphere. This time, it wasn't aimed at her wealth or status. It was aimed at her daughter's silence. She gathered herself, doing what she always did, standing tall, composed, controlled. But inside, something cracked. This wasn't a boardroom she could dominate. This was her child's heart on the line. That was when she noticed the man at the corner table. He didn't look like he belonged in the restaurant, at least not by the standards the place seemed to worship. His jacket was clean but worn, his shoes practical rather than polished. Across from him sat a young boy, no older than 8, happily focused on his food. The man's eyes weren't on his phone, weren't scanning the room. They were on the CEO's daughter, not staring. Observing, understanding. The CEO bristled at first, instinctively protective, but then she noticed something different. The man lifted his hands slowly and made a small deliberate movement with his fingers, then another, and another. Her breath caught, her daughter froze, then her face transformed. Her eyes widened, her posture leaned forward, and her hands moved in response, clumsy at first, then confident. A silent conversation bloomed across the restaurant, invisible to most, but powerful enough to stop time for the woman watching it. The single dad was signing, not perfectly, not formally, but with sincerity, with care. He wasn't performing. He wasn't seeking attention. He was simply meeting a child where she was. The restaurant seemed to fade. The whispers, the tension, the quiet humiliation, all of it dissolved into that single moment of connection. The CEO felt something unfamiliar rise in her chest, something sharper than anger and deeper than gratitude. It was awe. She learned later that the man's name was Daniel, a construction worker who had lost his wife 3 years earlier to illness. A father who worked double shifts, skipped meals, and measured success not in money but in whether his son went to bed smiling. He had learned sign language not from a class or a book, but from necessity. His late wife had been hard of hearing. Love had taught him patience, and loss had taught him empathy. That night, he taught something else entirely. The manager returned, still tense, still prepared to enforce whatever unspoken rule he believed justified exclusion. But the atmosphere had shifted. Other diners were watching now, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Some with guilt, some with admiration. The power in the room had quietly changed hands. The CEO realized something then. All her influence, all her wealth, all her carefully constructed authority had failed to prevent that moment of discrimination. But one tired man, with nothing but kindness and knowledge, had undone it effortlessly. Dinner continued. The food came and went, barely noticed. The daughter laughed silently, shoulders bouncing, hands expressive. The boy at Daniel's table joined in, mimicking gestures, turning it into a game. No one asked them to leave. No one dared interrupt. The restaurant adapted, slowly, awkwardly, but undeniably. When the night ended, the CEO left with more than she arrived with. She left with a weight lifted and a question burning inside her. How many times had she mistaken power for impact? In the days that followed, she couldn't stop thinking about that dinner. In meetings, during flights, while reviewing quarterly reports, her mind drifted back to the quiet exchange of hands and understanding. She began noticing things she had previously overlooked. The lack of accessibility in her own company buildings, the absence of inclusive policies she had assumed were someone else's responsibility. Change began not with a press release, but with action. She commissioned sign language training for all front-facing staff. She funded scholarships for deaf children. She invested in technologies that prioritized inclusion over profit margins, quietly at first, intentionally. And then she found Daniel, not through assistants or investigators, but through persistence. When she finally met him again, there were no cameras, no announcements, just gratitude heavy in the air. She offered help, not charity, opportunity. Daniel resisted at first. Pride and exhaustion had a way of hardening a person. But eventually, he accepted, not for himself, but for his son, for stability, for a future where kindness didn't have to be rationed. He took a role within her company, helping design inclusive workplace programs from the ground up, not as a token, not as a story, but as a contributor. Their lives didn't merge into some fairy tale. There were no overnight transformations, just steady progress, mutual respect, and a shared understanding that the world didn't need more powerful people. It needed more aware ones. The CEO's daughter thrived, not because the world suddenly became kind, but because she learned that her voice, silent as it was, could still be heard. Daniel's son grew up watching his father change lives without ever raising his own voice. And the restaurant? It eventually changed too. New policies, new training, a plaque by the door, small and easy to miss, about inclusion and dignity. No names mentioned, no credit claimed, just impact. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness doesn't require wealth or status, only awareness, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to Silent Hope. Your engagement helps stories like this continue to be told. And before this story ends, I have one special request. Comment the word hope below if you believe small acts of humanity still matter in this world. Because sometimes, the most powerful voices are the ones that never make a sound, and the greatest changes begin with a single unexpected gesture.